just like to say hello to you and greetings again from the voice of the seer. And today we're going to be talking about the Berlin Conference. And for many of you who have not heard of this, this is essentially where the European nations divided up Africa. And as usual, as my normal process is, I forgot to put this thing on Do Not Disturb. So hold on a second, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. So again, this is the real spiel, speaking to you out of the mouth of the Shiloh Institute, the capacity to build integral global leaders with a mindset of in the empowerment of Black people all over the world, from Africa to Israel to America and beyond. And I want to get into this conversation with you right now. So the Berlin Conference was in 1884 to about 1885. And so what was taking place at the time was that, and the initiator of really this, it said the conference was organized by a guy named Otto von Bismarck. He was the first chancellor of Germany, but really he wasn't the guy behind it. The guy behind it was the infamous, the butcher of Belgium, King Leopold. And King Leopold had Congo as his backyard. Congo was his playground. But Leopold really wanted to make sure of a very important thing. The word was out. Germany understood the wealth that was buried under the ground in Africa, and other nations. I'll name them all in a little while, but other nations also figured that, listen, there's just too much wealth here to allow us to just let one guy or a couple of these countries hold on to this. And it became a situation where there was potentially going to be a European war over the control of Africa. And so Leopold didn't want to, I guess, shake up his foothold in his particular area. And so he gets in touch with Germany, and Germany also was making serious inroads into the colonization of Africa, and military inroads. They were coming there to make sure that they were going to get theirs. So Leopold asked Otto von Bismarck to basically organize this meeting, and it had a couple of names. It could have been called, it was called the Berlin Conference, but it was also referred to as the Congo Conference or the West Africa Conference. And what they were essentially trying to do was to make sure that they would not fight over Africa, that they would divide Africa up and all share in the spoils of Africa. And of course, King Leopold wanted to make sure that his foothold on Congo was not removed, that folks could go and have fun somewhere else, but leave his piece of the pie alone. So Leopold, he convinced France and Germany that common trade in Africa is in the best interest for all their countries. And so he wanted to basically set it up where he was this orchestrator of trade. But essentially, it's basically like somebody walking into your house, looking at your children, looking at your mother, looking at your family, your furniture, and having a discussion of how they're going to divide it up in between each and every one of them. And the problem with this thing is that Africa is still under the dissection tyranny of these colonized countries. So when we got into it early, or when they got into it early, America really didn't have a strong foothold there yet. This is 1884 to 1885. America, of course, is still coming out of its period of slavery. They're still dealing with all of the issues that they have, realizing, of course, that if slavery is over, some of their wealth, namely from the South, is gone. Southern plantation owners are now figuring out ways to engage in the continent, still knowing that they can't bring slaves to the Americas. And they're figuring out ways how to go back to Africa and pillage more. So, so mostly what would happen is they would set up these trade routes. Joseph, let me see if I can read your comment properly. But they would set up these trade routes on the shorelines. And why they would set them up on the shorelines is because, of course, they wanted the protection of the navies, of the boats that could shoot cannons into their situation and escape quickly. Yesterday you said Esau is the, I guess you were talking about the father of Arabs. Who is Psalms 83 referring to? Let me jump into that conversation while you're here. But as I continue, I'll answer your question while I still talk about this. So what's taking place is Africa is being wooed into a non-beneficial trade relationship and, of course, colonization scenario with these European countries. And let me read them off who these countries are, right? So you've got Germany, Austria, Hungary, you have Spain, Denmark, United States, France, United Kingdom, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Sweden, Norway, and the Ottoman Empire. All right? The Ottoman Empire. So you have essentially every major world power right now diving into Africa and cutting it up during this 2-year conference, right? Or 1-year conference. And so what took place now is you have a continent being divided up by culture and language. Isn't it crazy? Imagine the European powers coming into America and deciding that they're going to cut up each and every state. One state would belong to each country. And now telling you that, well, we're a German state, you're somewhere in Colorado, and now you're a German state, and all of you have to learn to speak German. You have to learn to sing the German national anthem, German customs, German shops, German everything. The whole culture becomes German. And then right next door, in another state, let's call it South Dakota or something, they're Portuguese, and so on and so on and so on. And this is what took place. Like this is not even that. I mean, it's long ago, but it's not that long ago that these people who have lived thousands and thousands of years one way were then told, you are now going to be under the auspices of these Europeans, and this is how life is going to be. And you can't work, you can't trade, you can't do business unless you learn this foreign language and be indoctrinated into this foreign culture that has dropped on you. Psalm 83, he says. And so now today, we're having the same conversation about how Africa, how America has benefited out of the wealth of African peoples. So you said Psalm 83. So keep not thou silence. Let's go into verse, I think you're talking about verse 6. So let me read all of it, and I'll get back into this because he asked the question. So Joseph, I can do it justice. I will try. It says, so keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they hate thee, and have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent, and they are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites of Moab, and the Hagarenes, right? So this is a very interesting way to term this, right? If I can just use verse 6. So you have Edom, right, which we know is Esau. Esau is Edom. We read that yesterday in Genesis. We also read that Esau married the daughter of Ishmael, right? So we also have Ishmaelites, right? So we have descendants of Ishmael, but we know who those descendants are, what their backgrounds are. We talked about Ishmael mother was an Egyptian, and his father is a Hebrew, right? And they were cast out by Abraham. And God said of Abraham, don't worry about him. I'm going to make 12 nations and 12 kings of him. So, and we have the Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarenes. So Hagar is Ishmael's mother. I don't know if that means that Hagar had more children from someone else, and they were referred to as the Hagarenes, but it's hard to say that because normally children are not named, or a line is not named through the mother. So I don't know who the Hagarenes are offhand, but I will look into it. Can I continue? Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, those are all Canaanite people. Those are all Hamitic people. We know that Edom or Esau is a Semite, and we know that the Philistines are Canaanites, and all these other people are Canaanites. Assur also is joined with them. They have Hopin, the children of Lot. We know who Lot is. Lot is also a Semite. Okay. The children of Lot are also Moab. So this is kind of repetitive. Moab and Ammon. Remember, Lot leaves Sodom and Gomorrah, and he has relationships with his daughters. And his daughters give birth to Moab, and the other daughter gives birth to Ammon. So the Ammonites and the Moabites are cousins to the Israelites through Lot. But here in Psalms 83, at this time in this conversation and this time in history, which would have been at the time of David, which is thousands of years after Abraham, right? So thousands of years after Abraham. We got Abraham to Moses, which is about 2,000 years. And then we have Moses all the way to David. I believe it's another 2,000 years. So we have a lot of time here, right? It's a long period of time. There's a long span. And if that timing between Moses and David is off, I'll stand corrected, but I believe I'm correct with the first one for sure. But it's definitely a long period of time between Moses and David. If it's not 2,000 years, it's close, right? So it says, verse 9, do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin, and the brook of Kisron. So David is reciting the history of how God delivered his people from the time of Judges. Speaking of Sisera, Sisera was the individual who was defeated by Jael, the woman who put something through his head during the time of Barak and the prophetess. How come I don't remember her name? Deborah and Barak. And Sisera was the general who rose against Israel at that time. So David is reciting, or a psalm of Asaph. He's reciting how God should deliver his people the same way he did it in the past. Go on to verse 10, which perished at Endor. They became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeeb, yea, and all their princes as Zeba and Zalmunna, who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession. O my God, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind, as the fire burneth a wood, and as the flame setteth the mountain on fire. So persecute them with thy tempest, and make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and troubled forever. Yea, let them be put to shame and perish, that men may know that thou, whose name is Yahweh, art the most high over all the earth. My Bible actually says Jehovah, but we know that word is a bad translation. So you asked the question, who, yesterday you said Esau is the Arabs. Who is Psalm 83 referring to? So Esau, and what I want to mention is that an Arab is not a Hamite, right? Because we know Ham is Africa. An Arab is not really completely 100% in the line of Abram by choice. They are a separated Semitic line by God. God says that there's two nations in your womb, two completely different nations, and one the elder shall serve the younger. We know that Esau is Semitic. We know that Arabic is a Semitic language, but we also know that they are not the Semites of the Hebrew and the Israelites, of the Israelites. So what is an Arab? God pulls this line out of Jacob, separates it, and it becomes an enemy to its own brother. So what is an Arab? An Arab is a brother who becomes an enemy. That's essentially the summation of what he is. He also mingles with the people of the land. He's not of the holy bloodline, according to this. He's not of the promised bloodline, right? He is the bondservant that he mixes rather with the bondservant, where Ishmael was called the child. That's the child of the bondservant shall not inherit with the child of the free, the principle that God establishes. And then we see that Esau marries one of Ishmael's daughters. And so that line now becomes entangled through marriage. And we have a group of individuals, both Hamitic Canaanites and both Semitic Arabs, who are combined to be a confederate against the pure line of Israel, or the line of Judah here. So and it's actually Israel, the combined nation of Israel, because at the time of David, Israel is united. Judah and Israel are united. So to answer your question, that's what Psalm 83 is referring to. And if that's not a sufficient answer, please feel free to ask me anything else. Who you are, who your father is. So if Esau is white, his descendants are white. And so my position again, Esau can never have been white. Esau is not from the Japhetic tribes. Esau is not from the Japhetic tribes. Genesis 10 is clear who the Hamites are. Genesis is clear who the Semites are. It is clear where they live. In order for Esau to be white, you are trying to create a white man out of two black people. All right? You're trying to say that Jacob, who is black, and his wife, who is black, somehow gave birth to a white man. And that's not the case. Right? What's happening is that there is a Indio-Semite, I refer to him as an Indio-Semite, that's being pulled out of the Semitic line, who's been separated and called by God a different nation. I didn't call him a different nation. The scripture calls him a different nation. However, we can know he is not Japhetic. He is not from the countries of the Gentiles, as it refers to as in the book of Genesis. So that anthropology is just historically wrong. And sometimes we have to kill our sacred cows. Thank you very much, Ms. Coco B. Good to catch. Thank you. if Ham is African, does that mean Noah gave birth to Africans and non-Africans? And so the conclusion to that is yes, it has to be a yes. It has to be a yes. Because the entire world comes from 8 people. It has to be a yes. The only thing that we know in respect to a line change shows up here with Esau being called a different nation. Noah, remember, there's 8 people on this ark. There's Noah, there's his wife, right? There's his 3 sons, and then there's his 3 sons' wives. Out of that 8 people, that DNA pool, everybody is an ancestor from that 8-person DNA pool. Therefore, except for this strange conversation that God is having in Genesis about Esau, the entire DNA of the world was on the ark. Period. Was there Asians on the ark? Of course. Was there white people on the ark? Of course. Were they all Noah's descendancy? Some were biological and some were through the wives of his sons. Okay? So we either can conclude this, that Noah's wife potentially was of another nation or another race or some kind of, but we don't have to go that far. All we have to say is, out of the 8 people on the ark, the entire human race was represented. The entire human race as is today was represented on the ark. Because the only way to get something from nothing is God. And so we only have a conversation about a different nation in the womb of Rachel. Is it Rachel? Rebecca, sorry. I misspoke that. That's Isaac. Not Jacob. Isaac. Rebecca, not Jacob's wives. But Isaac, through Rebecca, gives birth to 2 nations. Okay? Ham is Africa. It's clear. It's very clear. Ham is Africa. Egypt is Africa, a child of Ham. The word that you see in Genesis 10 is Mizraim. Mizraim, the ancient word of Egypt, is Mizraim. Okay? So, unfortunately, we have been overzealous in our past to try to make Esau into a white man. It cannot be. Okay? He doesn't come from white people. He doesn't come from the Isles of the Gentiles. He is a Semitic that is a race pulled out of the line of Abraham through Isaac and Rebekah. And we see clearly who he intermingles with, right? And we're told also, given misinformation, that Ishmael is the father of Arabs. And that's not the case, because Ishmael is an African and a Semite. So he's not an Arab. And we're never told he's a different race. He is Abram's son through an Egyptian woman. Very clear. So, but what we are given a mystery and dubious information about, and giving us direct terminology from Scripture, is that Esau is a different nation. Right? And what kind of nation is he? He's a Semite that was hairy. He's a hairy Semite. Go into the Middle East and take a look at what Middle Eastern men look like. Okay? He is a hairy Semitic man. Period. That's what we were told of him. He's hairy like a garment, born red, which most of us are born red, but he's red and hairy. All right? We try to assume that means, and sometimes, remember, you're using the King James, so when you go back and see what terminology was in some of the other versions, I want to know if that word red was translated from something else. I'd like to know that. I haven't looked myself, but regardless, Esau is the Arabs, and you can follow the line. You don't even have to hinge on that one verse. Keep following the people. Psalm 83 was a fantastic verse you showed, brother, because Psalm 83 shows who he's in cahoots with. right? He's in cahoots with the Ishmaelites. He's in cahoots with the Hagarenes, which I am still assuming is Hagar's offspring through another man. To some extent, I believe that to be the case. I don't have proof, but the terminology is too close to ignore. The Hagarenes. Very. Ammon, you know who that is? That's Lot. Moab, Lot, right? So these conglomerate of individuals, right, come from different bloodlines, but the only group that we can say is distinctly a new nation is Esau's. That's why Scripture talks about him so clearly, right? And that's why he's called the head of that line. When Esau marries Ishmael's daughter, they're not called the Ishmaelites; they're called Edomites. Okay, so he is the dominant one there, and we know Ishmael had other children too, because they come up here. So that's my interpretation of that. So now, going back to the Congo Conference or the Berlin Conference, what we have to recognize in our history is that we have some incredible moments in history where there has been incredible planning being done to disenfranchise generations. Okay? Generations. Like, it's one thing for somebody to sit there and say, yo, man, I'm going to make this guy lose his job. I'm going to set him up. I'm going to say something. I'm going to make him lose his job. There's one thing that's to say, hey, I'm going to make this guy, get arrested. I'm going to lie on him and say he did something to me and let him get arrested. But there's something else when you sit there and you plot and say, I'm going to make sure that every descendant from this person, from this group, will always be our slaves, will always be our servants. I am going to make sure that the homeland of these people, the wealth will belong to us for thousands of years going forward. The level of deviousness, the level, and I don't use the word carefully, the level of evil that it takes to sit down and to come up with a plan that is so long-reaching that even today, from 1884 to 2023, the West, Europe, is still benefiting from the Berlin Conference. Still benefiting. And so we need to have incredible, deep, forensic conversation when it comes to the repairing of the financial, the moral, listen, loss of African people. Listen, there has been studies done by German, Austrian scientists and others about the depth of mental destruction, if I can just use that word, the emotional and psychological, I should say, psychological harm done by the Holocaust. Holocaust survivors, and there's many studies of how Holocaust survivors have gone through so much psychological damage because of the Holocaust. And these studies are well produced, and some reputable individuals have done incredible studies on them. And let's, for argument's sake, consider all of those studies to be very valid. Black Panther X, good morning, brother. Hope all is well. All is well. But the Most High has kept me. Amen. And the dirty llama ain't going nowhere. But these studies have been done that the Jewish community, from Auschwitz to today, some people are still suffering from the PTSD and anxiety and lack of sleep and whatever else from that. Can we now take that same level of clinical analysis and apply that to the African diaspora and acquaint that across the board to the African in Africa, to the African in the Caribbean, African in South and Central America, to the African in America, and say, look at the state of how that community is. Disenfranchised from its original origins, unknowledgeable about its beginnings, diverse in its practices of its traditions, multifaceted in its capacity to speak the language of its colonizer, the inability to speak or read in the original languages of their peoples, of their origin. What type of PTSD, what type of psychological damage, the incapacity to work together, the gun violence, gang violence, the music that is always targeted at itself. Don't you listen to rap music? Isn't it interesting how rap music and trap music is always targeted at us? We target our own music at itself. I'm a killer nigga. I'm gonna do this to a so and so, and our music is intent on the derogatory attack of us. It's positioned against us. Most of it. It's very rare we get stuff that Elvis is a hero to promote. We don't get a lot of Public Enemy music. We get more music that is targeted at destroying us. Isn't that a psychological anomaly that should be able to say, hey, this thing has not stopped? And I'm telling you, its roots, if it's not the roots, it's strong branches that took place at this conference. The 14 signatory powers would have free trade throughout the Congo basin because Congo is so rich. This is why the Democratic Republic of Congo never had infrastructure built. Never. Talk to somebody who's from Congo and talk about how hard it was. I mean, not even 10 years ago to get around in Congo. To go 30 miles in Congo, you need a helicopter, a plane. Because the goal was to destabilize the place so well that it was hard for anybody to come in there and navigate. You drop into your area, pick up your stuff, and leave. Why did they have so much rebels? And why did they make Congolese minerals illegal when Africans took it over? When Africans decided to take over the free trade, this free trade agreement, they called it blood diamonds. Let me tell you something. It's been blood diamonds since 1884. It's been blood gold. It's been blood jade. It's been blood ivory, right? The whole ivory trade that decimated, wildlife in Africa. And now it's amazing how it is white people who are the leaders of preserving and making and considering endangered species acts and laws, when it was them killing these things. They weren't endangered before you arrived, before you saw wealth in ripping out the tusks of elephants and leaving the body on the ground. So this is something that I would like you guys to dive into and take a look on a detailed level. Look at this and analyze it. The issues that people had between these rival Europeans fighting over land in Africa, because they knew, this you can't have this by yourself. There's too much gold here. There's too much minerals here. And they fought over this. They fought over it. It's like seeing a pretty girl in elementary school, and you're like, I want her to be my girlfriend. I want her to be my girlfriend, and she got no choice. She's getting pulled back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So this is where we are. This is what is taking place, and I wanted you guys to dive into it. If you haven't discovered it or unraveled it before, please take a look. I mean, don't believe everything on Wikipedia now, but you can still take a look. It gives you some information, and dive into this particular accord called the Berlin Conference. That's right. The Berlin Conference is the reason there's imaginary borders. There's a reason that the same people are talking two different languages. There's a reason. Oh, okay, it's okay. So there's reasons for all these things. So young fellas, they're cooking. So before we go into another fire escape, fire alarm, I'm going to come back again, talk to you guys in a few hours. I'm going to do a midday Bible study. All right. If you have a topic that you want to discuss, let me know and we'll get into it. All right. So I'll see you all later. The Berlin Conference, when they raped Africa and divided her up into pieces. God bless you, and I'll talk to everybody soon.